I don't know what you guys are all thinking about this situation in Venezuela, but it's got me pretty concerned. I mean, we just pulled Maduro out, what, about a week ago, maybe a little less. Then last night or this morning, I just saw that Russian warships are showing up, interfering with what we're doing. China's really pissed. A lot of people are worried that we're going to go into another war. Should we be there? What do you think? Anyways, me and Sarah got together over the break and decided we thought it would be a good idea to start a network. So Sarah's the first one in my network. And the second piece of content she's releasing has to do with all things Venezuela. And if you missed her first episode, which came out on January 5th, in case you haven't noticed, there's a lot of talk about Somalia. Somalia here in the U.S., Somalia overseas, Somalia land. Why are they considered a country? Sarah covered it all. It's called The Watch Floor. Check it out on YouTube.
Far more dangerous than like a poor or mismanaged country. It became a permissive state, a place where terrorists, hostile intelligence agencies, organized crime, and sanctioned regimes could work together with 100% immunity. And while Americans argued about whether we should care about Venezuela at all, we bared the costs through drugs, mass migration, intelligence costs, counterterrorism and counter-narcotics operations, and long-term geopolitical damage. This episode isn't about politics.
So did you notice that? Did you notice what we might have called like a limited hangout? A Psyop is ramping up again. This is what I've been talking. I'm very suspicious of Shawn Ryan, Sarah Adams. They always seem to start ramping something up when something else is about to happen. It's all this distraction. It's ironic that Ryan had Chase Hughes. I know Chase Hughes. I talked to Chase Hughes, quite a few years ago because I was looking at having him on my show when I was just starting out. And we were going to talk about sociopaths. And the reason we're going to talk about sociopaths is I was reminded about sociopaths by the sociopath co-star on Treasure Quest Snake Island who freaking sucker punched me, and I was forced to put him on the ground. And it brought back a lot of stuff and understandings about sociopaths. And I did give a call to Chase. We'll see if he will actually respond back to me, because I'd like to have him talk about psyops. Because what I'm seeing are major psyops. And the reason you can understand it's a psyop, it's specifically to get you emotionally ramped up. My objective is to get you to think critically. That was the whole origins of this show way back when. All these interviews that I've done with Jack Maxey, Michael Yon, E.M. Burlingame, it's about getting you to think clearly and critically the way my parents, your great-grandparents, my great-grandparents were taught in high school. I'll give you a quick story to define and explain that. I'm still warming up after having gotten out and getting the wood. This has been a very interesting winter. This year and last year. Where, like, we're at -2, -3. Actually, I have to subtract 3 degrees off the gauge because it's not far enough away from the house to actually get a more accurate reading. So we're probably about at -5 right now. I start losing interest in doing outdoor stuff at about 0. Anything up until 0 Fahrenheit, I'm fine. That's actually, dry snow. It's not that wet sludge. It's kind of funny. The way you can tell an Alaskan who's been here long enough and you're not just a Chichaco, some newbie who's gotten here. Because the newbies get here and it's just like, oh, the water, the snow, it's so beautiful, it's so white, it's a white Christmas. And then it becomes this point where it's like, you dread it and you're doing everything to get ready for it. And then it arrives And then these conversations through the area, it's like, oh, the white shit is back. That white shit. You know it's cold when you got booger icicles. This is why I don't cut my hair. And I shave infrequently just to protect my skin from the cold. But the good thing about it is it keeps people from coming up here. And we're going to be talking about that in the future. Kind of like my friend from the UP up in Michigan. I asked him one day, and I said, hey, why did you come to Alaska? And he said, well, I could tell what was happening down in the lower 48. And I moved to Alaska because I wanted to be sure that I ran out of people before I ran out of bullets. Think about that. Think critically about that. What's it going to be like? You've seen parts of it already in LA when it was all lit off. Detroit, Chicago. More of that is going to be coming, just like it did in 1918 in Moscow. And it was planned. These are planned. These are resets. These are the manipulations across nations, across history, in order to get these resets. And it's interesting because as a human being, I find it repulsive. You know, why would people think, why would a small group of people think that they have the right to have power over us as free citizens? That they would have the right in their minds to be able to dictate to us by dictating the conditions that can cause prosperity, as we had after World War II, or horrific consequences, as you saw in Cambodia in 1976-77 with the Khmer Rouge and the Pol Pot. Compare those two. Or what it was like in the 1920s in Russia. I'm going to tell you a story about a friend of mine. See, we live near the Old Believers. Very interesting culture. You should read up on it. The Russian Old Believers. So we have two groups. I live next to one village. And then there's a further village up at the head of Kachemak Bay, up at Fox River, Bozanenska. So I have a good friend in there who told me about the history of his family. And I'm going to tell you about that when we start talking about what happens when you have commies take over. Because Venezuela, oh, that's an indicator. But there's something that I will not permit on my land. And it's my land. I will not permit that. And my friend's grandfather was not able to not permit that on his land back in Russia. And that's what they will be doing. They were already doing it. That's why they're preparing us for the 15-minute cities, which is basically relocation. The same exact thing that happened when I was living in Vietnam as a kid, where you had military forces going into the country and relocating because they didn't want to have the water within which the fish of the Viet Cong to swim. And actually that analogy of the fish in the water, in the pond, in the sea, is actually from Mao Zedong. That is what is going to be happening in the United States if this evilness is allowed to achieve what they want to achieve. And the way they're doing it is they're actively using what they've learned, which is that social media has taken over the minds of the public. So everything that we were being hammered by in corporate media that people have become inured to and have become on guard is now happening in the social media. You saw that with Candace Owens. You saw that with those two Special Forces guys, Valhalla VFT and Paramount Tactical. I think actually one of them was recorded as having been paid, because what's happened, there is a venue for social media types, for social media personalities to get paid, and get paid handsomely by pushing a certain agenda. The agenda that they were paying for, which Israel was paying for, was to take out Candace Owens and to ridicule her, which is interesting because what happened with Paramount Tactical, he had a witness come on, which was a son of that guy that I forget the former Green Beret who was in Fort Huachuca, which started this whole thing. I think Mitchell. I think his name was Mitchell. Well, they were going after his credibility and his credentials, etc., and making it look like it wasn't even on the base. But it turns out that the son, who hated his father, actually corroborated that he was at the base. So that kind of like blew up in Paramount Tactical's face, which Jimmy Dory was kind enough to report on.
They were so desperate to delegitimize Mitch's testimony at Fort Huachuca that they found an estranged son who hasn't spoken to him in 20 years, who accidentally confirms Mitch's story on September 9th.
But what we have in a situation right now is we have a need for everybody to be thinking critically about what is happening with your social media in the way that you have already trained yourself, hopefully, to understand what has been happening with your corporate media. Our corporate media, newspapers. Remember, I started working for AP, Reuters, and Agence France Presse out of Bangkok, Thailand, just before I snuck into Vietnam and got caught back in '83. And that time, already, it was clear what the media is. And the media is defined by what the agenda is, either nationally or internationally. And the international aspect of it is what's changed over the last 40, 50 years. Because if it was a publication or a broadcast channel, radio, TV, the agenda was related to the context of the nation in which it was based. But since these have become totally international and they're owned internationally, it's based on what these entities are. In the same way that I cautioned, and I'm trying to get it clear to everybody that your central bank does not belong to you. And that when you are paying your taxes, when you pay your IRS taxes, and I'm going to repeat that the act of paying your federal income taxes is a voluntary act. There is no law that says you have to pay federal income tax. Don't trust me. Follow the link below to Agent for Truth, a former IRS agent. He shows you exactly how to do it legally. Do not do it illegally. Remember, government, and especially big government, and especially the government which we are living in this nation, in the United States, and actually other nations, is the one that we were warned about by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. You should watch. It's here. I'll put a link for that one too. Watch the speech by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. He was telling everybody, warning everybody, do not become the bureaucratic morass that was the Soviet Union. And you had seen previously, yesterday, the link that I gave you for Norman Dodd. I'm trying to remember what's in the full episode, but I remember what's in the full document in the Reese Committee, which I will be reading to you very specific parts to explain and flesh out information about what the Carnegie Endowment, what the Rockefeller Foundation was doing, what the Ford Foundation was doing, continues to do. These entities did not stop. These people who initiated this are long dead. And yet everything that they've initiated continues to work. It's dastardly, disgusting attack on the American people. The freedoms that you can't even imagine now are gone. But were guaranteed to our grandparents. And I don't even think there's some that my father, who was born in 1930, who was a Korean War veteran in the Marine Corps, who was the director of Asia Pacific Rim for Kohler International from 1972 until 1977, that he had the same rights that his father and mother had, or his grandfather and grandmother, who came from Iowa to Montana, from Montana to Spokane. You know, we're talking early 1900s. And how much has changed, because at about the time, we're talking even before the movement. So when did they move? They moved from Orient, Iowa, and they moved to, Bridges of Madison County, moved to Fort Shaw, Montana, which was the last fort against the Blackfeet in western Montana. It's 45 minutes west of Great Falls. And my great uncle is buried there. Every time I drive or fly through that, if I'm flying on my own and I can land there, I bring flowers to my great uncle who's buried there. So to have a connection to that history and that transference, and remembering my great grandmother in Spokane in 1974 at the old folks home, and she was like freaking 6 foot. And she was someone who was born in the 1800s. Think about that. What their life was in contrast to what our life is now. They would have felt that they were dealing with aliens from another planet based on our technology. I mean, electric can openers, heat-driven heat fans that convert heat into electricity in order to drive the blades. Who can imagine that? Or to have a catalytic converter inside this Blaze King, which, by the way, one of the best things that ever came out of Canada is the Blaze King. So if you people are cold, if you live in the north, get a Blaze King. I mean, it heats this house. I will tell you, don't get this redirect on the fan. I remove the fan on the back because there's more than enough drive off these heat to electricity converting fans. And by removing that, I'll actually be able to put a pot and cook right on this stove, which I can't really do. There's no space. All I can do is basically the humidifier to humidify the room. But this is the King Blaze King. This is the largest one that they have, and it heats this whole house, even when it's negative 20. Oh, God. Maybe 1 or 2 days, 3 days of the winter, I hope. But anyway, imagine how much we've lost in terms of our rights and how it's because of these continuous psyops. And this is why I get really annoyed when I recognize one with an SF buddy of mine. We talk about her all the time. She's the blonde, freaking crazy Ukraine. She's got that crazy eye. Watch some of her shows. And when she's talking, she's got that. Yeah. The one that just set me off with Sarah Adams is, and this is kind of like, it tells me everything since John Brennan and even George Tenet. John Brennan and the CIA. He was put there to destroy the CIA. And on that level, it's good. But on the other level, when it comes to actually defending this country, and you're supposed to put your faith in people doing the only thing the government is supposed to do, and I mean only thing. They're not supposed to give you free money. They're not supposed to protect you economically. The only thing they're supposed to protect you is against invasion or tyranny. That's it. And this is going to be interesting because tyranny is from within. And you have an oath. And there have been quite a few times that oath has not been fulfilled. And if you haven't noticed that, you need to go back and read the Constitution. Because there are things being done by this administration and on the past administration. And every administration, and I hate to say it, even to Reagan, but you know what? As far as I'm concerned, the last constitutional president we had in the United States was Reagan. That's how bad it's been. Because from Clinton on, it's repeatedly, well, no, not Clinton on, the one I fucking despise the most, fucking Bush Sr. And if you don't know who Bush Sr. is, you should really investigate his father's connections to the Nazis. I'll tell you the story one day about Bush Sr.'s father, great-grandpa Bush. Yeah, member of the Nazi Party, was trying to get a coup against, take the military, using Smedley Butler. This guy.
Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18.
When he was leading the bonus army. And for all my friends who are enjoying your 100% disability, medically discharged from the military, I suggest that you read up on the bonus army and not put so much faith in the idea that those checks will keep on coming. Understand why the bonus army was created, because promises were not fulfilled. And those promises were not fulfilled because you put trust in government, which is the exact thing that is un-American. How can I say that's un-American? The reason we have a Constitution is because of our Bill of Rights, and the Constitution is supposed to make sure that the government does not take away our Bill of Rights. That's all it's about. The way you do it is, first of all, the government is only dutied with defending the American people and our land, our borders. And that's it. Nothing else. Everything else is just child's play between Congress. And the whole idea that we, first of all, we don't have limits, we don't have term limits on them in Congress. Every official should have a term limit, because even the smallest king in their own little fiefdom can be dangerous, as we've seen, because our government has been hijacked to the highest bidder. When you've enabled yourself to be in a situation where service and the understanding of service, remember that people went into politics as an act of service. When you went into the military, it was an act of service. There's not supposed to be a standing military in the United States. That is the real reason for the Second Amendment. It's not so that you can shoot somebody who tries to kill you in a bank robbery, or to go hunting and put meat in the larder. No, it's in order to unify together and defend and repulse an outside invader, or again, against enemies, foreign and domestic. That's what it's all about. Second Amendment, that's all it's about. It's not just about protecting the First Amendment, like people say, oh, well, that's why we have the Second Amendment. We have the Second Amendment for its own unique reasons. We have our First Amendment for its own unique reasons. Each one of these amendments are there for a specific reason. Please go pick up a copy. They're free. Shoot. God, who's the college? They'll send you a free copy of the Constitution, Bill of Rights. Free. Go online. Go read them. Understand. Those are yours. Those are the laws that are there to protect you. So, as we continue to go, and we're listening to all these influencers that are coming in, and they're trying to get you to do things. That's why I say that Shawn Ryan and is it Scott Mann? Yeah, Colonel Scott Mann. He's another one. Look at wolves. See, I had a saying when I came back from Central America. Because, see, when you're in the world of combat, when you're in the world of black ops and covert action, you have certain groups of friends. Not just because you can chat about some things, but you share an energy. You share a quality about yourself. I realized that when I came back from Central America, and I was almost done because I had that contract with DEA in Ecuador. But when I was done, I could not relate to my prior friends who were still in that. Others who had broken away and moved on and gotten on with their lives. I reached out to those, and I actually reconnected. on Facebook. And now he's, like I said previously, he just passed away before 2-3 weeks before Christmas. Very good man. And I'll be talking about him. Frank. And the thing that I'm cautioning and bringing up is the idea that you've got you're going to get more of these psyops, because a psyop is in order to get the people to go in a certain way of thinking en masse. And the way you do that is to create fear and tension. And it's interesting. We're already programmed, through the movies we watch and the books that we read, adventure books and romance novels. These create a psychology and it needs to be fed. Some people might say that in your relationships, when you don't have that kind of polarity that goes back and forth, which actually in one way people would say creates the passion within a relationship, where you are smooth and happy and everything's like warm and lovey, and then suddenly you have this horrible fight and you're like, what the hell happened here? And then it could be caused, it's the woman's fault. The woman was causing this. And then it's like, maybe the guy was getting into it with her. Man, I'll tell you something. If you can remain calm, if you can feel like you're back in combat, remain calm. Everything will smooth over. It'll be good. All the explosive passion will get to the point that you can enjoy it instead of all that other shit. I tell all my male friends, who always call me, what's your advice? I said, just stay on the mark, breathe deeply, do not get drawn into it. You get drawn into it, and it just escalates, and it escalates. Do not get into it. You got to be like a good negotiator. And when you're trying to negotiate the end of a war, stick with the purpose. And that actually fits with what's happening right now. Pay attention. You're going to be attacked. You're going to be continued to be attacked this week, next week. Shawn Ryan's going to be having shows, and it's all going to be about all this. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. And then Sarah Adams will be coming in. One of the things like I said, I have problems with someone who says that, hey, I'm a CIA analyst because I couldn't do anything else. You couldn't do anything else. So you ended up as an analyst because you couldn't do anything else? Yeah, that doesn't sound good. Because the people that I worked with, we chose it because we saw it as that had to be done, and we were going to go and do it, and when we were done, we were going to get on with our lives. This is the mentality my father had. This is the mentality that people who went to World War II did, and people who went to Vietnam. You got drafted. You went. I didn't get drafted. I just witnessed an atrocity as a journalist, and I could have fucking turned my head away and said, that's just what happens when you got a war going on. And since it was the commies who did it, and the press wouldn't fucking report it because it didn't fit the agenda. The agenda in Central America was the government was responsible for all massacres. The commies didn't do that. They were fighting for the people. Kind of like, what was that forest in Poland where the Soviets, when they took over Poland, and they collected all the officers and they freaking just shot them and buried them in a mass burial? And it was never reported until the end of the war. Why? Because the agenda. The agenda is we couldn't talk badly about our allies against the Nazis. Even though our allies basically, what was it? God, it was just like, was it 10,000? No, maybe 6,000? Next time I'll get it for you. So if you talk to a Pole, they'll tell you about it. That's why they will never let the Russians back in again. Ever. Because they know what happens. They'll freaking kill them. But the crazy Ukraine, so that's the only thing she can do, Sarah Adams. Or is it Adamoronsky? I don't know. Origins of. They're going to be ramping it up. Be aware. Like I said, in conflict, be calm, breathe deeply, focus on what you're looking at, understand what they're doing. Why is this being broadcast to you? Why are they trying to make sure that you know about this potential terrorist attack that's going to happen? Because if you're living your life normally, you're in a level or condition yellow, which is having an awareness. I carry 24/7. On my property, I might get attacked by a moose at this time of the year, because moose don't like to be around people. They definitely don't like to be around dogs. And if you're with a dog and there's a moose, they'll come at you, and you have to defend yourself. So that's just being in a condition yellow, where you're just being aware and you're looking around, and that's what you should always be in. There shouldn't be a need for people to tell you, oh, God, there's going to be an attack. Because those kind of situations, you have no ability to respond to, because that type of response requires a SWAT team. That's a counter-terrorism unit that's going to be sent to go and deal with it. But why are you getting that information? Other than it could affect you psychologically. It could ramp you up psychologically as part of the masses. Understand that. That's what they do. And that's why I am being very clear when I've told you before. I have a lot of questions about Shawn Ryan. A lot of questions about that group. Because this is not the first time they've done it. They're always saying, oh, she's got some good stuff. And beware, all this stuff that's happening in Venezuela. Beware. Venezuela can't do crap. And if they could, it's because Deep State is paying for it and bringing somebody from down there to come up and shake you up. That's what it's all about. They're trying to shake you up. Anybody who's trying to freaking freak you out about that does not have your best interests. What they're trying to do is they're trying to play you. Again, is Shawn Ryan an active participant? Is Colonel Mann an active participant? Is Sarah Adams an active participant? Or are they just useful idiots? Do they think that, oh, wow, it makes me feel like I'm back doing what I used to do? Which, by the way, when somebody tells me that they were in GRS, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed because that's not SAD. No. That's not special activities, which is interesting because GRS is security. Which is funny because Shawn Ryan has this thing about, like, he can't stick with anything except for Hollywood. That I do find very, very interesting. Because a lot of people who end up in Hollywood, it's because they couldn't do anything else. Couldn't stick with the SEALs, couldn't stick with the agency, couldn't stick with his training. Oh, and then gets into a lawsuit with Taran Butler. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Oh, and then it got resolved. Okay. And it's interesting. Remember what I told you about wolves packed together? Well, Taran Butler has a very interesting reputation in Hollywood. And how is it that Shawn Ryan is not in jail or prison for having tried to become, Senor Pablo Escobar's lost son, in Colombia, when he was trying to be a drug dealer? Yes. Pablo, little Pablo. Yeah. As he told Kelly, right?
That was kind of an awakening, but I wasn't 100% ready to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had built quite the network down there, and I got tipped off that the federal police in Colombia were surveilling me and people that I was with. And so I E&E'd out of the country.
What's E&E'd?
I mean, I abruptly left. Oh. And I did kind of we call them an SDR, but surveillance detection route, and I wanted to see if they were surveilling me, if I was walking around town. And so I got rid of everything, cleaned everything up, and went to an internet cafe, booked myself some tickets, to a couple different places, jumped on one, and left the country.
Came
Never
back stateside?
Yeah.
Do we extradite to Colombia? Just asking for a friend.
Yeah.
And not a word from DEA, not a word from FBI. Like, hey, dude, we have to have a talk, because when you tell us that you were actually actively creating your own little cartel in Colombia, yeah, to see how far it would go. Okay. So it was Navy SEALs, how far you would go? Was CIA as far as you could go? Oh, excuse me, State Department. But you went from State Department to CIA, and the reason you went from State Department to CIA, you're just going from security guard to security guard. The only difference is that instead of like being in front of the embassy, you're guarding an analyst or a case officer who despises you. Because we could talk about that. Case officers and analysts think that they're better than everybody else. They're definitely better than the PMOs, and the PMOs too. Paramilitary operations officers and the paramilitary officers. Oh yeah. So the reason you don't know this, most likely, is because, and this is, I think, is one of the detriments. I mean, it's hard because it's like when you say you're for the draft, it's why are you for the draft? See, I've been for the military draft in the past, but not now, because the whole thing with the government is just so screwed up. But when I was younger, I would say, yeah, the draft is good because it forces everybody to go through the military. And you do 1 or 2 years of service, like it used to be in the 50s. See, people forget or don't even know that there was obligated service. You graduate high school, just like in Sweden used to have it. Norway, I think, still has it. And, well, now Sweden brought it back because they're terrified of the Russians. But every country had a... Singapore, when I was in Singapore, it's still there. You have to go and do your military service, and then you go. And the thing about it is, 2 things happen. One is, you turn out more disciplined people. These are people who get things done. That's why there's so many Singaporeans who go to other countries and they do very well, because they're disciplined. And they're disciplined because they get set straight. Okay? But there's another thing. Is that when you have a majority that have gone through the military, you can't have a minority like went through the GWAT. Look at how many people. God, what was it? In Vietnam, it was 6% of the U.S. population. World War II was 25%. That was the biggest we've ever had. It was 25% of the American population. The 2% and 1% they talk about in the American Revolution, well, it's actually not correct. Because what they're talking about when they talk about that, the 2%, there was a 3%, that's that patriot movement. Well, I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. That's because David Graham and his son Andrew, who are my direct line, they fought at the Battle of Kings Mountain in North Carolina. And they were from the militia in South Carolina. And they'd originally come, they were the Scots-Irish, the historical Scots-Irish from Ulster, came to South Carolina, Chester County, 1774. And they were in the militia because they weren't in the standing army. So if you're not in the standing army, you can't be recorded as part of the military. Right? Okay. So that's actually a misnomer. But, GWAT, what was it, 2%? Everybody's rah-rah. Yeah, but who actually went? The problem with that is when they come back, there's not enough people who can say, hey, when somebody starts telling you bullshit, that if you've been in the military or done some type of service, whether it was straight regular military, special operations, or paramilitary, you can say, yeah, that's bullshit. Kind of like Lone Survivor. When we started hearing the stories about what happened with that with Lutrell, and then the book came out, a lot of us knew there's something really stinky right here. And then finally, when Lutrell admitted, on whose show of all places? Rob O'Neill's? Yeah, the other guy who said he shot Osama? Yeah. that it was the Navy who wrote the book and told him, hey, you get out of this hospital and we're sending you to a PR instructor and we're going to have you trained so that you're going to be a fantastic personality on TV.
Here's your agents. They gave me my lawyers, all my publishing, everything. They facilitated all of that. Really? It was an assignment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Bro, they gave me some freaking media training and started sending me through all these schools to get me.
I've never heard this from Marcus Luttrell. I'm not dunking on the guy. I watched his podcast and I hear the Navy basically wrote the book and dumped it on him and then paraded him around. You got to see this to believe it. I'm not sure what I think here.
Ready to start going on TV. Mm-hmm. And then that came up. And that's when I first got so guys are probably going to know about it because I was told to keep it top secret. And that might have lasted 2 weeks, bro.
So keep the book top secret. Now, I'll link to this whole podcast. So apparently, we know there was a ghostwriter on the cover, a writer for the book. Doesn't sound like he even knew the book was coming out. He got debriefed after he was picked up by, the Rangers. And I guess they wrote the book for him.
They wanted me close to the Pentagon and all that.
Right.
If you know how this works, this part.
Well, yeah, you
know where I'm going with this. Yeah. So everybody was, God, I was going through all this in the hospital still and having all these surgeries. And they stacked that platoon, that Ramadi platoon with the hardest dudes. I mean, it was the best time, the best deployment. Mm-hmm. I was beat to shit. I was in a leadership role. I mean, I got to go outside the wire a few times, but I was LPOs kind of deal. Mm-hmm. And
so his second platoon, before the book comes out, so the Navy sends him to Ramadi, behind the wire, as he describes it, in a leadership kind of role. The LPO or not the LPO, I'm confused here, but let's keep going. And he's behind the wire, then they leak out the book. Who's they? The Navy.
The guys were great, man. So I just hid out there.
Yeah.
And we were there for 7 months, I think.
Jeez.
And then they got back to command. And this is when it started for me, man. They're like, hey, as soon as you get back, man, it's on. Oh, we were sitting at the chow hall in Ramadi. One of the guys in my platoon goes, hey, man, there's a book out about your story. And it had the cover online. I didn't know what online was.
So he didn't even know his own book was coming out. So let me draw a conclusion here. Be Captain Obvious, but the Navy got a writer for the book, and then he gets the book on his lap. And some one star's like, here's your book, son. Guess what you're doing now? You're a recruiter for the Navy. You'll hear it. I don't. I got some words, but.
So guys are probably going to know about it because I was told to keep it top secret.
Top secret, baby.
That's coming out. You're not. That's what it's not.
And they told me that too, and they trained me for everything. That was one of the coolest things, man. So when I got back, I got to go hang out with Admiral McGuire over at Warcom. He was my shadow, my top cover.
What do they have to train you for? It's your story, right? Train you for what? I guess he's got to read the book they wrote for him. That's what I'm getting from this. So Admiral McGuire drops a book in his lap and says, hey, son, here's your book. To train you, to coach you, to get the attorneys, the publicists. He didn't do that. I figured he was out of the Navy and somebody said, hey, you should write a book about this. That's what I thought the fact pattern was.
That's the deep state. That's the deep state that wants to make sure they can keep all that gravy train coming in for the MIC, the military-industrial complex. Be clear on what you see. Do not let it freak you out. It's been going on for a long time. This is part of your awakening. Kind of like, I've been watching David Icke. David Icke is spot on. Yeah, the reptiles, interesting stuff. If you haven't heard the interview, follow the link at the end of this episode. Go straight over to the man who walked through walls. Yes. McGonagall. Yeah. He was part of the Stargate program. Those were the guys who saw the reptilians that David Icke talks about. Go watch that episode in the other dimension. Oh yeah. We're going to get wild and crazy on this show. Shoot, I'd like to get him back on. I'd like to talk about the alligators. They called them the alligators. Oh yeah. When they were doing all that remote viewing for the CIA and for DIA. But remember, this is all about, they're trying to create chaos. Be really selective in the types of media. Are you getting just freaked out when you're hearing what you're hearing? Are they ramping you up emotionally If he's a useful idiot, he's doing it because he knows it's going to get you to come back and say, oh my God, it's kind of like the cliffhanger. Oh, got to the top of the cliff and almost fall, just like in the old movies.
Russian warships are showing up, interfering with what we're doing. China's really pissed. A lot of people are worried that we're going to go into another war. Should we be there? What do you think?
And again, social media is now taken over from that. But the question is, how is it being used? Is it being used in order to manipulate us as mass? Or is there actual information that's coming across? I'm trying to get this information across to you to be focused, to breathe, to look clearly, to look critically, just like my father was taught. See, this is the thing. I'm going to give you one quick little vignette before I leave, and we'll say goodnight. And that is, when I went to college, actually I was a returning student. After the war I went back. And so I was at San Francisco State, and my dad said, I was just talking with my dad. I was just asking, I said, what do you think? Should I take, Asian philosophy, or should I take critical thinking? And his eyes got wide. And he said, is this an elective in university? And I said, yeah. And he says, you didn't get that in high school? See, this is the thing. When you leave the government to your children's education, especially over the last 20, 30, 40 years, the government can do whatever the hell they want. And when that government is owned by the corporations and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, they have the ability to screw with your whole population to lead you down this road that they want you to follow into that trap. So I said, hey, I didn't get it in high school. And then he goes and tells me the story of what it was like when he was at John Rogers High School back in Spokane. And he was valedictorian. He even got a book. I have his history book. I read that history book, and it's a university publication. It's a university book. This is something you would read if you were studying for a PhD in U.S. history and U.S. government. He got it in high school as a gift from the publisher of the Spokesman's Review. And my dad says, yeah, critical thinking, when I went to high school, back in, 42, 43, 44, 46, it was required. And the reason is because back then, they assumed you were not going to go to college. My father was the first one to go to university. Everybody before that was in trades or had a country store or was a farmer. My great-grandfather, William Graham, who brought the family from Iowa, he sold his share of 800 acres around Orient, Iowa, so he could move on. And then he got into, he ran a country store in Fort Shaw, Montana. And then he ran a country store that one of my great-uncles had. And thank God that great-uncle had that store, because if he didn't, my family, my dad, my aunt would have starved to death. With my grandfather and even though my grandfather was doing well, he was a pipe organ repairman and builder. That's how he met my grandmother in Chicago at the trade school. So they didn't have that you would go into university. And so what happened was they tried to make sure that you were going to be a good citizen, which means you were going to be a critically thinking citizen, that you could look at all sides required to vote appropriately to your conscience and not be driven by your emotions. Your conscience and your critical thinking mind that would think practically about what decision you were making, whether you voted for this president or that. And when they started removing that and getting us all focused on our emotions, that's what makes all this stuff so easy for them to do to us. That's why it's such a problem. That's why we've had these situations where they can predict how we're going to vote, because we're not voting conscientiously and critically. We're thinking just in emotions. Who do we like? Who do we dislike? Not because who's going to be the best president. If you look at Nixon did a bunch of good things. People look at that. People look at Reagan. Reagan was actually good because he actually had the ability, because he knew how to use people's emotions because he'd been in Hollywood. He understood how to get people to respond in the manner in which he wanted them to respond. But it was actually more emotionally driven. Nixon didn't have that. Kennedy did. And he knew how to play to that. But Nixon didn't. Nixon got us out of Vietnam. Think about that. There was other stuff he did too. Not so hot. Took us off the gold standard, and we're paying for it now. And it was only because they were trying to get us to spend more money. Remember, when you're paying your taxes not to the U.S. government. You're not paying it to the American people. You're paying it to the Federal Reserve. If you're paying it to the Federal Reserve, that means you're paying it to the private banks. You're not paying to the government. You're not paying to your fellow citizens. You're paying your taxes to pay down the debt that has been incurred. It's like somebody takes your credit rating, buys a house, and then says you have to pay for that house. Think about that. That's what I talk about when I say that the central bank should be nationalized and brought back into what it was under Lincoln, where if you read the bill, it said a United States note. Go take a look at your paper money, your fake money. That's not real money. Real money is gold and silver. Fake money is fiat currency. And that's why we're in such trouble. Go look at it. What does it say on it? It doesn't say U.S. banknote. Doesn't say United States dollar. It says Federal Reserve note. So that is your payment to pay off the debt incurred by people who have stolen your house. On that note, go check out this guy again.
Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No. Let me tell you something. I've been all over the world. I've seen you fellas on the streets in Washington. There isn't this well-behaved group of citizens in the world that's sitting right in this camp. Take it from me. This is the greatest demonstration of Americanism we've ever had. Pure Americanism. Willing to take this beating as you've taken it. Stand right steady. You keep every law. And why in the hell shouldn't you? Who in the hell has done all the bleeding for this country and for this law and this Constitution anyhow but you fellas?
I'll put a link. And all my veteran friends, read up on the Bonus Army, because that's who Smedley is talking to. Understand who the Bonus Army is. Don't rely on the government to keep on paying all your disability. I'm sorry to say. It's not going to be there forever. Have a good night.